All right, welcome my friends to episode 703 of Extreme Health Radio. I'm super pumped you are here. We got one of my good friends, Mr. Matt Blackburn, on the show, and I'm a big fan of his work and his podcast, Mitolife Radio, which you should definitely subscribe to and definitely check out his company, Mitolife. We'll talk more about that as we get going, and I'll introduce him in just a second. If you're new to the show, we've pared down to one show a week, and that happens every Friday, gets released on Sunday, and then the other 6 days of the week, we release our best of episodes. So if you subscribe, you'll get shows 7 days a week. New shows on Sunday night, and this is episode 703. So what I will do is I will put the links to everything we talk about on today's show page, which is extremehealthradio.com/703. And that way you can get links to all the products or whatever we talk about. I'll try to take good notes for you. And let's see, let me look at some of our upcoming guests. Got some cool people coming up. Let's see, trying to pull up our guest list here coming up. Oh, we're going to have, Danny Roddy's coming up. Cool. We'll have him, and we're going to talk all about our metabolism and his work with Dr. Ray Peat and Jim Stevenson. We're going to be having him on again on vitamin D. And I heard about Jim Stevenson through Mr. Matt Blackburn. So that's cool. And then Morley Robbins. Oh my gosh. Josh Rubin, Dr. Michelle Lamassa Schrader, Jason Prawl. We're going to talk about ancient methods of healing, body, mind, soul. And Dr. Schrader is going to talk about recall healing, the spiritual, emotional side of disease. So that'll be really cool. So make sure to subscribe to our show. This is, I think, Matt's third episode on Extreme Health Radio. And if you're unfamiliar with his work, he can be found at matt-blackburn.com. And we're going to be talking about his CLF protocol, and that is calcification, lipofuscin, and fibrosis. And we're going to dive deep into hopefully each of these aspects and separately on different podcast episodes so we can dive into what it is and how to correct it. And he's got a lot of cool things going on at his Mitolife Academy, as well as his supplement line, which I highly recommend. Let me pull him up here and turn on his audio. What's up, dude? Can you hear me?
Hey, Justin.
Awesome. Perfect.
Thanks
How are you, man?
Doing awesome. Yeah, it's a sunny day up here in North Idaho, and solar panels are getting hit, and tons of pine trees are dropping pine pollen. So
nice. Have you started harvesting the pine pollen yourself yet, or no?
I think next week. Yeah, it's actually the top of the pine trees right now that seem to be dropping it, but it's blanketing my car, all the surfaces around my house.
Wow.
Definitely feel a little boost in energy from that. The nasal inhalation of pine pollen. I actually made a video on YouTube for my Mitolife Academy on smart snorting, and pine pollen was in there.
Nice. That's awesome. There's something magical about that substance, huh?
Yeah, even when I put it in pancakes, I definitely feel a boost, because a lot of people say, you don't get the androgens in the oral, and, it gets broken down in your digestive tract, unlike the tincture. But I definitely feel a boost, and testosterone isn't just for reproduction. It does so many things. It's even involved in bone and calcium metabolism. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good stuff. Yeah, I remember a while back when I first learned about pine pollen, I went and harvested it with Kate. We would knock on people's doors that have huge pine trees in their house, and these people were a couple blocks away from the beach. And they just thought we were crazy. We're like, hey, is it okay if we kind of, harvest some pine pollen from your front yard? But it was cool. It was a good experience to do. And then you appreciate just how much it takes to get a substance like that, right?
Yeah, actually, Charles that I had on my show, Charles Barber, told me that you can shake a pine tree and put a tarp down around it. And that's kind of how you get it in bulk, and it'll just fall under the tarp. And then you can kind of funnel that into something.
Okay.
But I think the quick way to do it is just to put, maybe a plastic Ziploc, ideally BPA free, whatever. The sun's not hitting it, probably doesn't matter. But, paper bag, whatever you want to use, and then kind of knock the pollen into that bag. So that's kind of the quick and easy method. But if the bulk method would be the tarp.
Yeah. Have you played around much? Are you familiar with the shikimic acid in pine needles?
No, some people up here are brewing pine needle tea, and I think it's the vitamin C that's often highlighted in it, right?
Yeah, well, apparently it's super high in vitamin C, which is why I used to make it. But then I think I heard about that from Marcus Rothkranz back in the day when I was raw, you know. But I've been hearing now you can use what are those things called? Like a device to clean your jewelry. I forget what those things are called. A cleaner
Yeah,
of
it's
some
like
kind. But
ultrasonic or something. Yeah.
yeah, I used to have one of those devices, and you can either use that or some kind of a coffee machine or something to make pine needle tea, and it extracts shikimic acid, which apparently is what the drug Tamiflu is derived from. And they are using that to disable viral replication or something like that. So I don't know.
That's cool. Yeah, I miss going to health conferences, and I remember, I think this is 4 or 5 years back in LA. I found a company um, called Montana U-tip. Or it's like Bighorn Botanicals, and they harvest Montana U-tips,
Huh.
and they contain a compound that is used in some actually cancer therapies.
Oh, wow.
And so they have tinctures and soaps, and it's amazing what the trees have in them. I mean, the resins, the bark,
Oh, it's
you can make,
amazing, huh? Yeah.
birch bark. I use birch bark in my toothpaste.
Nice. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
cool. So, a while back you put out the CLF protocol, and I kind of was into the RCP protocol, which is awesome as well from Morley Robbins, and so when you released the CLF protocol, which is again calcification, lipofuscin, and fibrosis, it's similar in the sense that it gets to the root cause of diseases and where the breakdown starts happening with us. And so today's show, we're going to talk about calcification, but just leading into that a little bit, how did you get the idea for this, and why did you want to put together this entire protocol? And maybe let's explain a little bit about what it is, and then we'll touch on calcification mostly.
Great. Yeah. So back in 2005, I became vegetarian,
Mm-hmm.
and I was eating kind of processed foods and Subway and just your conventional foods, and wasn't really into health. I was more ethical vegetarian.
Mm-hmm.
And then 5 years later in 2010, I went raw vegan pretty much overnight and discovered green vegetable juicing and organic foods and all the basic stuff and
Uh-huh.
GMOs and
Yeah.
fluoride and all that. And changed all that pretty quickly. Like I went actually pedal to the metal, and within a year I was making pretty drastic changes and feeling it in brain function and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. But I was still, restricting animal foods, and I wasn't aware of fat soluble vitamins, especially vitamin A, retinol,
Mm-hmm.
only found in animal foods. And so about 4 years after that, I started reintroducing animal foods, but for the first time, cleaner, grass-fed meats, bison, pastured eggs, just high quality animal foods, unlike what I was raised on, like conventional. And all the while, I was studying environmental pollution, EMFs, chemicals, heavy metals, just the toxicity in the air, the water, and eventually the soil.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really focused on water. I was really fascinated by uh, just water in general, drinking and bathing. And I got
Mm-hmm.
into the shower filter thing. And then I went on this quest to find the best drinking water, like a lot of people do. And usually in the alternative health space, they end up on spring water as the end all be all, the most natural, the most high vibration, the cleanest, whatever they say.
Of course.
Uh, and in Southern California, I think there might be some, but they're all pretty well kept secret because people don't want it to run out or whatever. They're not continuous. So what I ended up doing is finding aquifers, and I found wells.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a few. There was the Carlsbad one, which I eventually found they cut with reverse osmosis water, so it's
I'm
not
surprised I
100%
never
water.
saw you there because I used to go there all the time.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I would go there every 2 to 3 weeks, and I would fill up a good amount,
Yeah.
just so I don't have, because it was quite a drive. And then I went to a equestrian center, a place I found on Find a Spring, and was
Mm-hmm.
filling up there, but I was spending like $2 a gallon, and it was so much work and such a time commitment. And so then I got into water filters, and
Mm-hmm.
usually people start at the Berkey, which is just a simple gravity filter, and then I got into the water distiller,
Mm-hmm.
otherwise known as steam distillation, which is drop by drop. And then I got into reverse osmosis, and pristine hydro, and went down that rabbit hole. And from talking to a lot of people, from going to conferences, from reading books to listening to podcasts like yours, I was just connecting the dots over those many years. Meanwhile, I was working minimum wage jobs and just driving constantly on Southern California road highways, and
Yeah.
just trying to learn as much as I could while I was working and going to school, and hyper focusing on water. And at some point, I remember I was uh, leaving my college at the end of the night, and I was in the parking lot holding my glass growler. It was
Uh-huh.
like for beer, and the campus police rolled up on me, and they said, "What do you got there in the bottle?" And I said, "Oh," I was really excited. I was like, "This is the best water on earth. It's well water. I vortexed it. I had my affirmations on there. I had gratitude, love, and
Oh,
forgiveness."
I love it.
And they kind of just looked at me like, "Oh, this kid must be really high." I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay, have a good night," and just drove off. So I did a lot of experimentations with different energy devices underneath, with vortexing, with manually, and with devices, and just
Mm-hmm.
tried to do everything I could, putting it in Myron glass and putting that in the sun, which I think is an awesome free practice that people could do that really improves water quality. But when it really comes down to it, there's only so much you can do to water. You really have to start with a clean product um, to have to have an ideal drinking water. And the reason why I'm talking about this so much is because the calcium connection. All these books I'm reading on calcium,
Mm-hmm.
not one of them mention water, and it just blows my mind because it's all
Really
about dairy and calcium supplements.
interesting.
And
Yeah.
no one thinks about the calcium in tap water, in well water, in even spring water. And when I moved here to Idaho, the two 10-inch filters that the owners had on the whole house inlet were caked in brown and iron.
Oh,
They're
really?
rusted out. And they're just two sediment filters, because a sediment filter will take out iron. And I, I mean, that was just another nail in the coffin for me that, hey, this CLF, this calcification, lipofuscin fibrosis, this accumulation of iron and calcium are contributing to much, if not all, of disease. And people are looking right past the water that they're drinking. And you think you're out here in Idaho, you're in farm country, you're in a rural area, and
Mm-hmm.
you're safe and everything's clean, you're breathing fresh air, and the air might be the best piece. But
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to water, it's usually chock full. And this water I tested it was chock full of iron and of calcium. And over time, 10, 20, 30, 40 years of drinking inorganic minerals, which is called hard water,
Mm-hmm.
it accumulates, and it accumulates in the soft tissue. And then when you stack that with like the vegan diet, which I got swept in for a while, you start to make the connection. Like, wow, okay, these vegans are supplementing D3. They're not eating cheese. They're not eating animal products. If they are taking K2, they're taking a really small amount of it. They're getting a ton of calcium in their Berkey water or their spring water or their
Mm-hmm.
well water. And so no wonder people are just kind of spiraling mentally and emotionally, and not really making progress in their health or perhaps their life, because their brain is just accumulating all of this stuff, and it really inhibits neuronal function. It inhibits cellular communication and ATP production. It's really the mismanagement of calcium that is the problem. Calcium is supposed to be mostly in the bone, like 99%, and then 1% is elsewhere. And there's some in the cells, There's some in the blood. But when we supplement D, when we get excess calcium via maybe green juices, maybe calcium supplements, maybe
Mm-hmm.
the drinking and bathing water, then it starts to accumulate in the soft tissue. And we're not just talking about pineal calcification because that's what gets the most highlighted, but it's also the hippocampus, the medulla oblongata, the all of the different structures of the brain, the hippocampus, impaired memory, um, really just roller coaster emotions. A lot of this is caused by calcification of the soft tissue structures.
So
And when,
let's
yeah,
talk a little bit about we'll talk a little bit about the soft tissue as well as in different areas of the body. But that piece you mentioned before with spring water, that's a big one because I was into that as well. There's a spring here, and my wife and I would drive a couple hours to go get spring water. We'd load up like 6 5.5 gallon carboys glass. We had the handles on them and all that. But so there's a real problem, right? With spring water and with the hydrological cycle. And the reason why water is so important is because our bathing water is so key. Like we're absorbing so much water through our skin, and people don't realize that aspect as well. So with spring water, let's talk about that, and then we'll maybe talk about the hydrological cycle and how that's liberating iron and all that kind of stuff. But it's a real issue, this iron calcium piece with spring water, because that's what everyone is sort of going towards, right?
right. And the basic theory is that the Earth is the ultimate filter, and so uh, going through layers of sand and bedrock and eventually trickling down perhaps hundreds of feet into these underground aquifers, people say that you can't recreate that with a countertop filter or with a RO system
Mm-hmm.
or with any filtration unit. And I would disagree because that ultimate filtration system, quote unquote, will not take out acid rain, which the acid rain products are called sulfuric and nitric acid. And you could just do a simple Google search, EPA, acid rain, and read about how air pollution creates water pollution. And what comes up must come down. And burning fossil fuels, but also bunker fuel, so all the transportation of goods overseas,
Mm-hmm.
they supposedly just switched to a cleaner fuel, but this bunker fuel created way more acid rain than all the cars and all of industry combined. So, and this has been happening for a long time. I mean, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years.
Mm-hmm.
And this does make it to the aquifers. It does seep down there. And so there's different aspects to water. The two major ones that are good to focus on is the TDS content, which some people only look at that. I'd say
Mm-hmm.
most people, spring water hunters, only look at that. So they use
Right.
a TDS meter, total dissolved solids.
Mm-hmm.
If the parts per million is low, then they say, oh, the water is clean. That is a dangerous assumption because that's only going to show dissolved solids. It's not going to show acids in the water. And it's one of those things where you don't want to get neurotic about it, but at the same time, you don't want to be chronically ingesting these acids. Because, I mean, you buy a drain cleaner. I have a drain cleaner under my kitchen sink, and you look at the ingredients, it's sulfuric acid, and it says avoid contact with the skin, contact poison control immediately,
Mm-hmm.
and it will blow out the drain. It will eat anything in the drain. This is very corrosive stuff. It's not just like we're playing with Kool-Aid here. This is
Right.
dangerous material, and it eats away at the system, and it causes extreme oxidative stress. I don't think we even understand, because no one's focusing on it, the physiological downstream effects and toxological synergy, especially that sulfuric and nitric acids have on the system. And so deionization is a very simple way to remove acids, and it's called a cation and anion resin filter. And there's different grades of those, so it gets complicated, but at a kindergarten level, that is how you neutralize acids. that is the only way. You can't add something to water. You can't add baking soda or bases like a lot of people will do and say, oh, the
Yeah.
water's alkaline. That's a joke. The acids are actually hidden. So even if you put a tablespoon of baking soda in your water, it doesn't neutralize the acids. It could still be there. Um, so it's
So
one of
it's
those
interesting.
things where I was. Oh, sorry, Ken.
No. It's just so interesting because of the double effect that this is having on the water we consume. Because not only do you have the sulfuric and nitric acids that are, you know, causing extreme calcification of the bones and soft tissues and stuff, but then also somehow it's also liberating iron from the soils and depleting copper levels as well. Like I think there's an 80% decrease in copper, which is something you and I both talk about, but it's that ratio of copper to iron is hugely important as well. And I don't know how these acids are liberating iron from the soils, but that's an issue as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it's really throwing off the whole process of how a land plant, when the biogeochemical cycles are intact, can take a rock and turn it into a usable carbon bonded organic mineral.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not in that world anymore. We're not in Kansas anymore, and everyone
Yeah.
forgets that when they drink their green juice. And that's not to say green juice is the devil. Here and there, especially if it's greenhouse grown, you do it with filtered water. There's levels to this, but
Mm-hmm.
just the way that people are using it to cleanse, is not smart from a mineral standpoint, because what the acids do is they kill the microbes in the soil. They mutate some, they kill some, and then they'll wipe out the fungus, and then they'll actually overpower the fulvic acid. So fulvic acid is something that the plant makes to break down rocks and then attach a negatively charged carbon to the rock, and it's
Mm-hmm.
called an organic mineral. And that's why Shilajit is so misunderstood. People don't get why Shilajit is so foundational.
Mm-hmm.
It's because we're not getting organic carbon bonded minerals unless, like I said, trying to do what I'm doing, which is like setting up a greenhouse, filtered water, protected from rain, protected from even the atmosphere, because the acids can fall down even without rain, and just trying to build up the system. I mean, there's certain things that can neutralize, like a lot of permaculture people are mitigating the problem to some degree
Mm-hmm.
using like indigenous microorganisms, and worm castings actually is a source of fulvic acid, which is
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool. Rock dust. So anyone that farms at home, like a really good start is just don't buy store-bought soil, buy like peat moss, rock dust, worm castings, and then try to get some indigenous microorganisms, mix that in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then filtered water, of course, no chlorine, or try not to make it hard water. And
Yeah.
then you could actually start to grow some good food. But as it stands now, there's not much food on the planet. And that's why I think the carnivore diet is trending, and people are trending towards a more animal based diet, like I have for years, because the animals are the primary filter instead of you eating the plants, which you're getting directly all the hard minerals. You're eating the animals that ate the plants, and so the animals are taking the first hit for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of helps a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you look at this calcification, it's something that no one really talks about. We're kind of speaking before we started recording, it's just um, how this is so prevalent in our culture, and you can almost tie back every disease, to this calcification factor because of what it's doing to the tissues and to the bones. And then you have people supplementing vitamin D on top of that, and that's a whole separate thing. But it's just so interesting how cancers, heart disease, all of this can be tied back to calcification, right?
Oh yeah, when calcium builds up in the eyes, you get cataracts. When calcium builds up in the cartilage, you get joint deterioration. When it builds up in the gallbladder, you get gallstones. When it builds up in the arteries, you get plaque. When it's in the bones, in the wrong spot in the bones, you get spurs.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go down the list, and it seems like these stones are a big issue. Everyone's doing these gallbladder flushes, and it's like, where are these stones coming from? What are they made of, guys?
Yeah.
Calcium. You look, it's calcium oxalate stones. and you have
Uh-huh.
kidney stones. And I don't know why people never take the next step. Like, what formed these stones? They're not just magically appearing out of the void. Like, what are they made of? Where do they come from?
Yeah, yeah, it's wild because you really got to look at, where the prevalence of this calcification is coming from in your own life. And I think suspect, I mean, not only is it, in all the food, like Morley talks about, the iron fortification program and stuff, but on top of that, if the food that you're eating, if you're eating primarily plant-based foods, you're getting that calcification directly, like you mentioned. But then water, drinking water too, huge. I didn't wake up to the spring water thing until, a long time. It took me a long time to get to that piece. But then bathing water too, like you think of a lifetime of bathing and being exposed to eating, bathing, drinking. And it's just an accumulation over time. And you look at older people, and no wonder why they can't move and they're stiff. And, you know, it's crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I always emphasize with spring water, um, if you're traveling or if you want to just, enjoy yourself on a hike when you're in a different place, like drink the spring water. It's not like evil. I'm not
Yeah.
making that point. I'm just
Yeah.
saying like consistently, because it's part of experiencing life. It's kind of like tasting food, and different waters have different mineral content, and you can
Hmm.
become like a water connoisseur. Unfortunately, that's not a very healthful profession at this
Yeah.
point in Earth's history, but it's still enjoyable, and there's still an energetic quality there, and there's still different minerals that you're getting, and just the experience. I would say it's worth it, but is your everyday go-to drinking water. Just like you said, don't forget that these things accumulate in the tissues, primarily the iron and the calcium. And if you go to your health food store and you look at the water section, as I do often, and whether it's plastic or glass bottles, you turn the bottle over and you look at the breakdown, and usually it'll say calcium and or TDS. And some of these waters, these mineral waters that are touted in the alternative health community, have an insane amount of parts per million, upwards of 1,000. Pellegrino, Gerolsteiner. Even though there's bicarbonates in there, that does not mitigate the high calcium. Gerolsteiner is a calcium bomb, and I do not recommend that.
Wow.
I would say even distilled water is better than that.
Hmm.
I would say it's the Adam Bergstrom style of getting no minerals is better than getting those minerals. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's all of it. I mean, it's the calcium supplementation, which I used to deliver cannabis to old people's homes, and I remember looking at the supplements they were taking because I was really in depth studying health at that point,
Hmm.
and seeing the calcium and iron supplements that they were taking. And hopefully they were getting some benefit to the cannabis. I'm sure it was
Yeah.
somewhat preserving their bones and stuff, but I
Right.
was like, geez, these poor people, I mean, they're kind of speeding up the soft kill there.
Yeah.
Um, and then the vitamin D supplementation, that's one that's a whole rabbit hole. We've both had Jim Stevenson Jr. on the show, as you mentioned, and
Hmm.
uh, I used to supplement D3 as cholecalciferol.
Hmm.
D3 is found in many nootropic supplements.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of brands are promoting it in tincture form as a complex, and they say it's for everything. It's a cure-all. They say low secosteroid hormone D, which is its real name, is associated with every disease. And you have to start to question if it's a hormone that our body can make, um, then why do we need to supplement it in these large doses? And more importantly, why did they raise the bar? That
Hmm.
was my biggest thing. Why did they
Yep.
move it in 2010 from 12 nanograms per deciliter all the way up to the sky's the limit? The more the
Hmm.
better. The higher you are to 100 nanograms per deciliter, great. You'll have stronger bones and better mood and better everything, less risk of all disease. But when
Yeah.
you look at the synergy with mineral waters or tap water, Berkey water, spring water, it's all synonymous, plus vitamin D, the vitamin D increases calcium absorption. in the gut. And that will lead to hypercalcemia, which is high levels of calcium in the blood, and that will lead to blood vessel calcification. And phosphorus goes off the charts, and phosphate will actually accumulate in the lining of the blood vessel with calcium. And then it starts this downstream effect of magnesium deficiency, sodium loss, potassium loss, adrenal fatigue, and then eventually the cells actually can't uptake glucose effectively. And so you get hypothyroidism and diabetes, which people blame primarily on sugar, but it's really a mineral story. Because if you have mineral imbalance, then you can't properly utilize carbohydrates.
That's so true. That's so true. And we're going to take a little break right now, but when we come back, I want to ask you about the NPK fertilizer and how that affects the whole thing as well, because that's another whole big issue. What's going on in today's plant food, and it's really important to make sure that you're doing the right things. And there's a series of different supplements that Matt has and recommends, and we'll get into some of the solutions to all of this. We're going to take a little break right now. I hope you guys are enjoying the show. Go check out Matt's website, matt-blackburn.com, and his website for his supplements, which I highly recommend, is Mitolife. And we have a little discount coupon code too if you want to go through our link and support the work that we do. And just as an aside, anytime, like I think my wife today just bought something on Amazon, and I always support Matt's work. So whenever you're buying something online, go through someone who might be an affiliate, just so that you can support two different people and their work. So if you want to support our work, the coupon code for his Mitolife supplements is EHR15. That'll give you a little discount code. And I'll put links to everything at extremehealthradio.com/703. And when we come back from the break, I want to talk about the MPK and how that affects everything as well. So I hope you guys are enjoying the show. We're going to run a little spot with our biological dentist, Dr. Stuart Nunley. He had neurological issues at one point, because at some point during his career, he was removing people's mercury amalgam fillings without protection. Could you believe that? So years and years of that caused a massive amount of neurological damage. And he actually thought he was diagnosed. I think he was coming close to being diagnosed with Alzheimer's or something. I forget what he was being, diagnosed with. But the primary method of detoxification for him was sauna therapy. And here's a little clip from him if you want to check it out.
What I chose to do? I chose to go very, very slow as I detox. So one of the things that I did is I invested in an infrared sauna, which was huge. That was a big, big part of my healing, because interestingly enough, many times patients who have heavy metal toxicity lose the ability to sweat. And so I was one of those. I could not break a sweat. And the infrared sauna helped me to retrain my body to be able to sweat. It was a huge part of my overall detox.
Doesn't Dr. Huggins say, as long as there's more going out than what's coming in, you're okay?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think he's right. I think he's absolutely right on that.
Just a little plug for my friend, Dr. Stuart Nunley. He's such a cool guy. If you're looking for a biological dentist to work on your mouth, and if you have cavitations or mercury fillings, check him out. He's salt of the earth, dude. I love him. He's at healthysmilesforlife.com in Texas. But anyway, sauna therapy was one of the ways he used to detoxify all of that mercury. And I learned from Morley a while back that it's possible to even sweat out iron, but it's nothing like a blood donation. But sauna therapy has been used for thousands of years. It's really a far infrared device that we have is really a light therapy device, because it's frequencies of light that are penetrating your skin and oscillating the fat cells to be able to release these toxic compounds that we're exposed to. And I think getting in a sauna 2 to 3 times a week. I used to do it like 5 days a week or 6. And then we had twins. And now I'm lucky if I get like twice a week. But I love my sauna. And I know Matt has this same sauna too. It's really cool. Check it out if you guys want to support our show and the work that we do at extremehealthradio.com/703. And here's a little clip from our buddy Ken Rolla talking about the GreenWave dirty electricity filters and Stetzer as well. But check it out.
Dirty electricity, what that does and what it is actually for people that aren't aware is when the power company is generating electricity and sending it to you, they don't have a constantly perfect steady supply of 120 volt 60 hertz electricity pulsing to you perfectly every time. It fluctuates quite a bit, and if you put meters on it, you can see it'll fluctuate. And so that fluctuation, and there are micro fluctuations as well. And those micro fluctuations, all that fluctuation creates these pulses in the wiring that will create EMF pulses around you. I mean, the wires themselves, when electricity is flowing through them, that will create a field around the wires that can affect you. But then when you've got all that little pulsing and micro pulsing going on, it's creating these frequencies of fields that are pulsing and affecting you negatively. And so those devices like the GreenWave, they will act like an inductor and smooth that signal out so you don't get that pulsing. And then my devices, because of the scalar fields, they will structure the EMF coming off of the wires in your house and everything else as well. I use those. I use Stetzer filters and GreenWave. I got both.
Yeah, so it's funny because one of the things I was mentioning to our Academy members this morning, every Friday I do a live session with people and answer questions and just kind of support each other. And I was just talking about stressing the importance of mitigating your environment for your health. Like, I would rather have someone eat McDonald's in the worst diet ever and make sure that their environment they're living in isn't promoting disease. And so I like these types of things because it's like a one-time investment. See, with a sauna, you have to get in it. You have to have time. You have to have discipline, right? But these dirty electricity filters, either the Stetzer or the GreenWave, you can put them on your wall and it will knock down the magnetic and electric fields that are coming off these wires that, according to Martin Paul, is showing a permeability aspect to the cell membrane. I know Adam Bergstrom doesn't believe in the cell membrane, but there's something that's causing the calcification or the calcium from the blood to get inside the cell. And when that happens, he's mapping like hundreds of diseases to this, where this calcium's going in places where it doesn't belong. And a simple way to mitigate your work environment, whether you work in a cubicle or you work at home or where you sleep or where your kids sleep, is getting these dirty electricity filters and putting them around your house for $30. You can mitigate all of that. And we've had Magda Havas on the show talking about how this dirty electricity, the 60 hertz that we're using in North America, is causing blood sugar imbalances and affecting the physiology of the cell. I mean, it's just crazy what we're doing. So GreenWaves are great. We have them all over our house, and I recommend them. You can buy them for $30, put them around. You can test. Stetzers are good as well, but just make sure you're mitigating your environment. And if you want to support the work that we do, you can go to biochargeme.com and go through any of the links there, buy whatever we have in our store. And that's how we keep our show running. That's how we keep doing everything we're doing to bring this content to you. And so I'll put links to both of those at extremehealthradio.com/703 as well. And let me bring Matt back on. Let's see, where are we here? There we are. Matt, it's interesting looking at those dirty electricity filters, because you're talking about calcium in the blood getting inside the cell with Martin Paul. That's an interesting aspect of this whole piece too, right?
Oh yeah, it's really a synergizer. I think it's by design that we have calcium supplements and excess calcium coming in through the vegetables and in the water supply. It definitely synergizes with everything that we're dealing with to increase inflammation. And yeah, absolutely. Intracellular calcium is a hallmark of stress. And under the influence of harmful non-native electromagnetic fields, those calcium ion channels will open. Calcium will flood into the cell with iron and really create a ton of oxidative stress. That can contribute to really every disease. And in the books that I've read on calcium and calcification, they talk quite a bit about pharmaceutical calcium channel blockers. Mm-hmm. And maybe Martin Paul on your show has mentioned that those have actually been used to mitigate EMFs to some degree. Because if you can mitigate the calcium coming into the cell, you can stop the inflammation in its tracks. But a natural calcium channel blocker is magnesium, and that's what everyone forgets. And everyone forgets about the burn rate, and that calcium and magnesium are on a seesaw. And just like iron, when you have excess iron, you deplete copper, and when you have excess calcium, you deplete magnesium. And the burn rate could be increased to where your requirements for magnesium is in the 3, 4, even 5,000 milligram a day range. It's all contextual, and person to person, but for the most part, I would say across the board, people's magnesium requirements are being dramatically underestimated.
Yeah, it's amazing how little people know about magnesium. I have a mineral book here from, oh gosh, Minerals in the Genetic Code. I forget who wrote that. Dr. Richard Olry. And I went to the magnesium section when I first got it, and he talks about how, it's responsible for 300 enzymes, functions and stuff. And I'm just like, wow. I mean, and the information I've looked at, it's almost 3,800 enzymes of our 9,000 that we have. It's 40+% of our metabolic function requires magnesium to function, and it's just amazing that people don't know that. It's wild.
Yeah, and you were asking me before the commercial about NPK fertilizer, and I think I have a better way of describing it now than I have in the past. And basically, it's this very simply, that when the soil's too acidic, aka from acid rain, so natural rain is 5.5 pH, maybe in that range to 6, somewhere in there, and you start getting acid rain when you get down to the 5 and below, and I think some of the rain throughout the world has been measured at like 2, which is,
oh my gosh,
will
wow,
burn you. It's really acidic. And when the soil's acidic, minerals like potassium and calcium get depleted, and heavy metals, aluminum and manganese, skyrocket, especially when the pH dips below 5.5. And so their solution, the big boys, is just to lime it, just agricultural lime, and that is going to increase the pH of the soil. And it's this very simplistic mindset, right? You're quote unquote deficient in iron, just take it. You're quote unquote, you have osteoporosis, just take calcium. It's a very just kindergarten, very elemental way of thinking about it. Just lime the soil to increase the pH. And this agricultural lime is a soil additive made from limestone, essentially chalk, pulverized limestone. And it's a source of calcium. It's a source of a form of calcium called calcium hydroxide. And if you mix calcium hydroxide with carbonation, like carbonated water, CO2, cold carbonated water, you can make calcium bicarbonate. But when they do it on our soil, the way that it's done, the salt-based, which is the key, the NPK fertilizer, because NPK, it's just like the macro minerals in a human. You have your calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, chloride. Those are like our macro minerals, which are the main ones we need to function. But then we also have boron and copper and zinc and all of these trace minerals, vanadium and indium, all of these other ones that are very important for multiple different functions. But with a plant, there are those basic 3 that you can grow a plant with, those mainly the nitrogen, phosphate or phosphorus, and potassium. But that calcium hydroxide, or that hydrated, that lime that they add to the soil, that is completely unnatural, and that will end up in the plant. And if the plant doesn't have, which it doesn't, the fungal the mycorrhizae, the fungal population, the bacteria, and the fulvic acid, which is the trio to turn a rock into an organic mineral, and then you have that calcium, that lime, that agricultural lime coming in, then the plant just soaks up that calcium. It can't convert it. And that's what people kind of have this misconception about plants, is that they will filter the water, they will structure the water. The plants are magical. They can do everything. They can transmute everything. And we're putting too much on them. They're getting hammered by biosludge. Farmers are watering them with well water or tap water. They're getting hit with acid rain. They're getting hit with salt-based fertilizers, which makes the plants bloat and get really big, and they look good, but they're not good for you. And it just goes on and on. And so we're really in a matrix system where, people think organic food is enough, especially without supplementation. And you have, keto coaches just saying, eat fish and vegetables and you'll heal everything. And it's really hilarious because we're not looking at the mineral piece. We're not looking at what people are supplementing. We're not looking at the toxicological synergy and how everything works together. And another piece I want to mention too is that vitamin D and excess calcium, so whether they're supplementing calcium and vitamin D or just getting calcium in the water and supplementing vitamin D, either scenario will tank vitamin K2. And vitamin K2 is something that's near to my heart after I chipped my front tooth during my vegan years very easily with a glass bottle. And it took me several years to figure out how I chipped my tooth with barely tapping a glass bottle, a Myron glass bottle, to my teeth. And very simply, I was K2 deficient because I was vegan.
That's crazy. Yeah. So you chipped it. Did you get it fixed or no?
Not yet. I've been kind of on this experiment of trying to heal it purely with vitamin K2 supplementation. There are some really interesting articles online about the epigenetics of teeth and just dentition with vitamin K2. And everyone's familiar with the Dr. Weston A. Price that, became famous because he studied the dentition and the jaw structures, but especially the teeth and the teeth growing in without needing, braces or these crazy headgear that I grew up with kids wearing around me. He didn't see any of that in indigenous cultures because there was K2 in the diet, and he credited it to they weren't eating grains and I think refined foods and things like that. But I think it was largely the K2 piece that made the biggest difference. And so I've been averaging like 800 micrograms a day, sometimes double that, sometimes 3,000 micrograms, and just high dosing. There's no toxic levels to vitamin K2. That's the really interesting thing.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and all the books I've read, they've said, especially a good one is called the Calcium, Vitamin K and the Calcium Paradox by Kate Riem Blue. And yeah, there's no LD50. They've given rats, I think it was the equivalent to if you were to take like 30,000 or 30 million micrograms. You could just megadose it. And there's just a benefit. The liver loves K2, and it's really balancing on calcium because there's what's called these vitamin K2 dependent proteins, matrix GLA protein and osteocalcin. And both of those are active in the bone. And there's numerous studies on all the different pathways, but just to put it simply, it's the carboxylation of vitamin D that these proteins do. So let's say someone supplements vitamin D3, they need to carboxylate, aka activate that vitamin D. And if it's not there, like as Jim Stevenson talks about with D3, it can get stored as D3, and that is completely unnatural because it should be converted to 25D and then possibly to 125D.
Right. Active. Right.
Active. But if there's no K2, what happens? Most likely that D3 supplement is stored in that form in the tissue. And that can get to super high concentrations. And that is scary because we really don't know the effects.
Yeah, it's interesting when people talk about the supplementing both of those together. And I was just telling someone in our academy this morning, she was saying that she's on vitamin D3, but she's also taking, vitamin K2. And I was saying, it's fascinating because if you're going to take D3, you better be taking K2. But our argument is you shouldn't be taking vitamin D at all. And if you don't take vitamin D and just take the vitamin K, you're going to get all those beneficial aspects. But the vitamin K is really just mitigating some of the damage that the vitamin D3 is doing. And that's why you have a vitamin K2 supplement without vitamin D, right?
That's correct. Yeah, and if people are all worried about the bone, because I think there's this big scare thing that if you're vitamin D deficient, then your skeletal system is just going to disintegrate into sand and you'll fall apart. But there are multiple factors at play here, especially with bone health, and it's largely magnesium and vitamin K2. Those really orchestrate a lot in the body. And there's also, thyroid hormone, there's parathyroid hormone, even testosterone and estrogen, there's calcitonin, but calcitonin is controlled by magnesium. So magnesium is really pulling the strings, as you mentioned, 4,700 enzymes, not just 300. And magnesium and K2 really regulate calcium homeostasis. And there's also trace minerals, which is why I'm such a fan of Shilajit, like boron. And I've been kind of diving into boron research because I used to use 20 team borax. Did you ever get into that, Justin?
No, I didn't. But no, I know people did that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think because of Castor, I was adding like an eighth of a teaspoon and actually drinking it.
Oh, wow. I know people do that in their bath, but you were drinking it?
Yeah, it's relatively safe. It's just boric acid that you're getting from it. And probably if you have the enzymes to break it down, then it's probably okay. But a more ideal source is most likely Shilajit. May not be as concentrated, but if you take Shilajit consistently, you'll get the same amount over time. But boron deficiency will actually cause a loss of calcium and magnesium. So boron is there's this interplay between boron, vitamin D, and calcium that's really deep. But where I try to simplify it is just say, look, focus on mineral balance. Where are you getting your trace minerals? Are you limiting the things that are imbalancing you, like iron and vitamin D and ascorbic acid and omega-3s? And then you add in the right things, and then the body will balance out, and you don't need to, scour the research and really rack your brain, and you can and have fun with it. But the body's intelligent, and if you provide the minerals that it needs and take away the ones that it's already getting too much of, then it will balance out, and you don't have to, micromanage every little thing. But even fruit, what's interesting, grapes and plums actually have boron in it. It's called calcium fructoborate, and it's fructose bound with calcium and boron. It's really interesting.
Yeah. That's interesting. So I want to get into magnesium and Shilajit in just a sec, but one final piece on the vitamin K. Let's say someone's dealing with this hypercalcification, which is just the result of a default level of living, in modern culture, because you don't even know it's happening. But all of us have this calcification stored in our tissues, just like we do iron. So if we're dealing with that, I would recommend, older folks get on the vitamin K2 because of its ability to regulate calcium, right? And, cardiovascular issues as well. But if you want to sort of detoxify, if you, for lack of a better term, what this calcium is doing inside the body, how is vitamin K2, or vitamin K, I should say, doing that with someone like us who we just want to, live a long time and be healthy and flexible and strong and stuff like that? What's vitamin K doing for someone like us?
Yeah, so it depends on the dosage. That's a good question. And there's so much context involved there, the age of the person, what water they grew up drinking, the food they grew up eating. I've seen studies where a dose of 90 milligrams of MK7 didn't really change the level of calcification or inhibit calcification, but it did reduce atherosclerosis. But when you start getting into the 200 micrograms and higher, I think the 300 is kind of like the sweet spot consistently. Then over time, you could really start to see not only a stopping of further calcification, but actually a reversal of the calcification deposits. And like I said before, there's no really, high dose that, you can't get over a dangerous limit with K27. The liver will just say more, just give me more. And really it's trying to get extra hepatic. That's why we take more K2. And I included phyloquinone, which is from evening primrose, which is called K1. That's a plant form of K1. So green leafy vegetables have K1. And that doesn't have too much of an effect on calcification. It does have other beneficial effects. But the main reason is to actually satisfy the liver. So it has the K1 and then it lets the K2, especially the MK7, go throughout the system, reach the mitochondria to help with electron chain transport and help with energy production. It'll actually help with mitochondrial dysfunction at the different complexes. Like if complex 3 isn't working so well, it'll actually soup it up. So it's actually working on the engine level of the cells. Because that's why I have Mitolife. It's like, hey guys, let's like start looking at the engine of the cells and try to soup that up instead of just like throwing things at the body and hoping it sticks. And so, yeah, that's what I would say. Kind of the more the better. Obviously, financials is a factor.
Right.
But as I said, I average 800 micrograms a day, and that's kind of like an anti-aging protocol, I would say. If I was just looking to reverse calcification or calcium excess related issue, I think, the normal dose of 2 capsules a day would be enough.
Yeah, it's interesting. Do you know if anyone else is doing K2 away from D3?
I actually don't. I've seen some. I actually just went to a supplement store. I was really excited. It was a whole supplement store. It's just all about supplements. And
Wow.
I should actually do a video. I don't know if they'd allow me, but just film me walking around because I was just going down the aisles. And it was a lot of protein, muscle milk and all that stuff. But I got to the K2 supplements and they did have MK7, but it was very low dose. Usually they only go up. I think even Mercola's is like a little over 100 or something. Mercola has great information, not bashing him, but it's really getting above 200 at least, and then getting over 300. And then mine is actually 400 micrograms per serving, which I think is the minimum. Same as copper. It's like, how much beef liver should you eat? Can you overdo it? I don't think so. I think it's when you look at just the widespread retinol deficiency and the ceruloplasmin deficiency, I think it's really hard to get too much. And it's always context. I'm kind of like a jump all in guy.
Yeah, totally.
Right away. I think Adam said he started off buying 25-pound bags of sugar, white sugar, when he learned about Ray Peat. But
that's funny.
I'm kind of like that, but it's always smart to start slow, with supplements and see if you react. Usually I say just start with the serving size in the bottle, whatever supplement it is, and slowly increase from there. And if you feel better, then great. And if you want to take more, see if you feel even better, then great. And then, find your sweet spot. I still want to do an experiment of taking like 20 K2 capsules of my product and see how I feel.
Oh my gosh, yeah. That'd be awesome, yeah. That's funny. Okay, so yeah, vitamin K is going to be huge for the regulation of calcium and reducing the amount of calcification that's going on in the body, obviously. But and magnesium, we touched on it a little bit, but let's just sort of do a shotgun approach with the rest of magnesium piece, because that's really important because of how many enzymes it regulates, right? So I've always heard that citrate is one you want to avoid. So what are your thoughts on magnesium, the kinds to avoid, the best kinds? What's your magnesium protocol? You know, I think it should be something that you focus on every day, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's remembering that vitamin D and calcium deplete your magnesium. Um, so, uh, yeah, the forms of magnesium to avoid are definitely citrate, carbonate, oxide. Those are the main three. Citrate, there's some research that it actually throws off ceruloplasmin,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll actually decrease bioavailable copper in your body. That's kind of a topic of debate, but whenever there's a debate, I just, I don't, there's many forms, so I'm just going to avoid that one to be safe. There's also orotate, magnesium orotate, which isn't talked about too much. There's so many different forms. I think the best ones to take are bicarbonate, which you can make yourself very affordably, which is the best way to do it. I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
buy magnesium bicarbonate. Make it yourself, and then transdermal magnesium chloride. And I always tell people if they're near a beach, just go dip in the ocean a few days a week. And the ocean has magnesium chloride and sulfate in it. So you're getting both forms of magnesium for free. So there's no excuse, if you don't
Mm-hmm.
have the money to supplement. Ideally, that would be an everyday thing. But then there's the temperature and absorption. And usually for transdermal, you need to be in the water for quite some time to absorb it. I'd say minimum 45 minutes to an hour.
Mm-hmm.
10 minutes isn't really going to cut it. And then I also like magnesium glycinate or bisglycinate.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, these are bound to amino acids called chelated forms. Magnesium taurate is really good. I really like magnesium threonate, and I
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of experience with all of those. Definitely feel them, especially with coffee. That's a really good combination.
Mm-hmm.
Magnesium and coffee go really well together.
Oh,
It's kind
totally.
of like a speedball, clarity cocktail.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's about it. I would say just experiment and find the ones that work for you. Obviously find what works financially. And for years, what I was doing is magnesium foot baths. And so I would
Mm-hmm.
just boil water on the stove, filtered water, pour it in a copper foot bath, and just soak my feet for 45 minutes to an hour. And that's a really practical way to get it in, but you just have to use enough. And so there's bags of magnesium chloride you could find online, and I
Mm-hmm.
usually buy it in like 8-pound bags, and you could pour in 4 pounds at a time. I would say a minimum in a foot bath. Don't just do a cup. Do enough.
Right.
But if you do, don't waste it. Be sure to stay in it. And if you can, find a float spa nearby and do a sensory deprivation float, because that magnesium sulfate does raise your magnesium levels as well. You also get some sulfur, which can be useful for radiation poisoning and different things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you feel it when you start taking magnesium. It's just one of those things you really have to be consistent with. I think where people mess up with magnesium is they just take it for a couple weeks or a month and they forget, and then they stop taking it. And then, why do I still have my health condition? It's like, well, you weren't consistent with
The
it could
magnesium.
take 6 months. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy because I was telling our people today, our academy members, they're like, every day we should have a protocol. Like we should be thinking, okay, how am I going to get magnesium in, and you can get it in certain foods, that are super high in magnesium. Cacao is super high in magnesium, and other foods you can, do it that way. And then I do the chloride spray a couple times a day. In the winter, I do more baths. So I'll put a bunch of magnesium chloride in my bath. And then as well as the magnesium bicarbonate, drinking it, and doing foot baths as well. And doing supplements. Like I like the malate right now. The glycinate I really like as well. I used to play around with the threonate. I didn't really notice much of a difference with the threonate, but I tell you what, the one that I felt the most right off the bat, and I don't really feel supplements that much, but dude, magnesium bicarbonate, when you make it right, it is like you can feel that one. It's amazing.
It's the best gift you can give to someone when someone comes over, to help us do work on the house. I'll give them a shot, and espresso and magnesium shot, both of those.
That's awesome.
Soup them up a little bit, and yeah, I think it's one of those things that everyone needs. It's
And so
funny.
this is it's helping with
Okay.
calcification, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it regulates all the hormones that regulate calcium, as I mentioned, parathyroid hormone and calcitonin are regulated by magnesium. And so it's really pulling the strings. And when you just take a step back and like someone with a chronic illness, when they look at how they've lived, what I was raised on Honey Nut Cheerios and Lucky Charms.
Yeah, me too.
And that ferrous iron, that
Yeah.
that dangerous form of iron, the iron filings in the cereal. And then I look at the tofu. I was eating blocks of tofu growing up. And so I was getting some phytoestrogens that the estrogen kind of synergizes with the Pufas, the lipofuscin and the iron. And I was on like the lipofuscin lifestyle,
Yeah.
Love my parents. They were doing their best, but like, a good 20 years of my life, I was contributing to calcification, lipofuscin, fibrosis in my body. And so that's why people might say, Matt, you're so extreme, but I have about 20, 25 years to reverse of mistakes that I've made. And it's not, trying to do it fast, it's enjoying the journey, but it's just being consistent and taking my systemic enzymes, 3 every morning, taking my magnesium every day, my Shilajit, my K2, my vitamin E, especially if I go out to eat. Vitamin E, I feel like, is one of those things that you can balance out within a year or two. I was high dosing it the first year after I learned about this information, probably around the 3,000 milligram mark a day. So I was taking about 8 capsules.
Whoa, that's a lot. Yeah.
Or 8 to 12, like the 400 IU dose. And that's another scare thing. People say, don't take over 40 IU of E. And there's all these scare articles online. And always fear. That's the biggest method that is used to control people, especially when it comes to solutions in the natural health world. They'll scare you away from the good things. And meanwhile, they're pushing in your face all of the things, ascorbic acid, iron, vitamin D, calcium supplements. And you just go to a place like Costco or your health food store and just look at the end caps, look at what's highlighted, look at the eye level stuff. And it's just like whatever they show you on the news. It's usually the 180 and no different in natural health. So I like that you've started to say alternative health. So we need to go past alternative to a deeper layer, because there's not many people talking about the things to avoid, because it challenges a lot of the marketing. A lot of people are making a lot of money off omega-3 and vitamin D supplements, and it's a big business.
I think I looked the other day, and by 2027, I forget how many $billion industry that it is. I think it's in the double-digit billion. It's the number one supplement sort of faction of natural supplements, natural health, is the fish oil industry. And, I know Adam Bergstrom talks a lot about this as well, but man, you're talking about people making lots of money, and you can make so much money promoting that stuff. And there's no one really talking about its effects except for a handful of people. And that's why I like to have guys like you on the show, and Adam and Morley, and sharing this kind of information, because it's really important, especially with like the fats. Like, you got to make sure if you're going to consume fat, you better make sure it's the right kind of fat, right? So important.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I actually just interviewed Keith or Tomo Littlewood in my show. That's actually this week's episode.
Oh, cool.
And he was saying excess saturated fatty acids can displace transthyretin from thyroid binding protein. So transthyretin is what carries inactive T4 from your thyroid to your liver.
Oh,
and he was saying in that process, it can kind of get thrown off with excess saturated fat in the blood, which will trigger a lot of the
keto people.
Keto people, the anti-sugar people. Yeah. Because it just shows the importance of carbohydrates, right? Or balance. Some people do better on 40% carbs. It's that macronutrient ratio you have to play with, but people are so afraid of increasing their, carb, because they'll gain a little bit of weight, which they might need or whatever.
Right. So let's just touch on the Panacea, the Shilajit product that you have, in terms of its relationship to calcification as well. And maybe after this, we can just kind of give people a little protocol of how much to take of each one of these 3 to start out with. Well, or the magnesium, you don't have a magnesium, do you?
Soon.
Oh, soon.
That'll be
Okay.
out probably within the next few weeks. It's a complex of 3 forms, and I've been taking these 3 forms for years, and definitely definitely feel an effect from it. And recently, I've been doubling up like 2 doses a day to
Oh, wow.
see how I feel from that.
Dude.
And yeah, the pills stack up, but I always tell people, if you have a lot of capsules to take of good supplements, which is the key,
Right.
take it with food. Because on an empty stomach, I've had it happen to my friend where he took like 40 capsules at once or something on an empty stomach, and you could just get an upset system with that. So it's always better to take your capsules with a meal. And so with breakfast, with lunch, and with dinner. And for me, it's so intuitive that I don't have to lay them out. I don't need a pill box or anything like that. I just remember what to take, and I'll kind of cycle things. But yeah, with Shilajit, I was introduced to it in powdered form years ago, and it's pretty much the resin extracted with water into a powder. And I still felt the effects from that. I still to this day add it to my coffee, Shilajit powder, and I like it in its various forms. Definitely still feel the powder form. Also great to put in your bath, the Shilajit powder. What it is thousands of years old, pre-digested plant and animal matter of even extinct plants and animals that were here millennia ago. And over time, they're compressed in the mountain in high elevation regions of the world, in the Siberian mountains, the Andes mountains, even the Rocky Mountains, usually above 8,000 feet, 11,000, 12,000 feet, in that kind of neighborhood. And it gets crushed into a resin tar, and it's actually called asphaltum. If you look it up, there's various different names for it. And it's a resin, and it's a rich source of fulvic acid. Around 5 to 10%, somewhere in that range, is usually the fulvic acid content. And fulvic acid is that thing that the plants are supposed to make to break down an inorganic mineral to an organic mineral so that we can actually utilize it. And there's 84 minerals that run our body plus that activate, as I like to say, all these electrical highways throughout the body. And we tend to forget about the trace ones like indium and these ones that are involved in glucose metabolism, like these little minerals on the periodic table that we've just seen a few times in school, have a profound effect on our physiology. And the picture is so much bigger than sugar causes diabetes. There's all these minerals involved in the metabolism and glucose metabolism, and we're not getting them. Vanadium, and a lot of people are taking colloidal gold, colloidal silver, all these liquid colloidal supplements, and it's better to go to a natural source, because that's like playing with fire. You're just doing alchemy, you're trying to figure things out on your own, whereas nature figured it out in the form of Shilajit. And it's a food-based supplement. It's a whole food supplement. It's natural. It just oozes out of mountains. And it was actually discovered when monkeys were eating it. And tribes people saw that and they said, oh, it must be good. And so they tried it, and their hair started growing back. They started having more babies. Their fertility got up. Their energy levels went up, and everything got better. And it's a synergizer. It's a cornerstone of Ayurvedic medicine. And, if you're taking Tulsi, holy basil, mucuna, bacopa, any herbs, it's actually a potentiator. And I found that it's a potentiator of coffee for sure. And so there's this like magic combo. It's just like Shilajit. I like 5 tablets of Panacea, which is a mega dose. I wouldn't recommend starting there. That could be too much for some people because it's a strong heavy metal chelator. So if someone has a lot of aluminum in their brain, which a lot of people do, if it comes out from the Shilajit and your body cannot detoxify it, you could have a reaction. Neurological reaction, something like that. So always start slow, 1, 2, see how you feel. Probably do low dose for a while. Like if I've never taken Shilajit before, I would probably start with, probably 2 tablets a day. with a meal, not on an empty stomach, and do that for maybe 6 months to a year because it's so strong. I've been on it I lost count, maybe 6, 7 years now. I used to make raw chocolate and put it in there. But it's really when you start getting like into the consistent daily 500 milligrams to 1,000 milligrams dose where you get the red pill effect. And I do believe it is the red pill from the Matrix where it literally does wake people up. I do credit that to connecting the dots that I have purely to Shilajit because of its effect on the electrical highways, especially in the brain. So I think it's making those electrical connections so that you can make conceptual connections with your health and with just life in general.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah, and it also helps chelate iron, to my understanding as well.
Yeah, that is not talked about enough. There's a great book called Shilajit in Perspective, and it's very expensive. It's hard to find, but it's worth it. And it actually goes through D-alpha benzopyrones, DBPs, and their effect. There's so many aspects to Shilajit, but the fulvic acid is really the key player there, and it definitely does chelate excess iron. And if you just search anemia Shilajit, you'll see studies where it shows that it benefits anemia. It's also been used for high altitude sickness. So similarly to coca leaf, people use for that. Shilajit is a little less stimulating, probably easier to get, and helpful for that. But also infertility, just iron dysregulation in general. It's actually a source of ceruloplasmin. So because it contains fulvic acid, the copper is in ceruloplasmin in Shilajit, and it talks about that in that book. So it is a source of, you're not going to get retinol in there in large amounts and all the other stuff, but it is like a whole ecosystem condensed in a little tablet. So you're getting all your trace minerals and your copper and your zinc. And I think you only, if you're on Shilajit, then you only have to think about magnesium, potassium, sodium, chloride, and then calcium, which I didn't mention, but the ideal source of calcium is dairy. And, unless you're growing your own veggies with filtered water in a greenhouse, dairy is great. And it's, we have goats here, so I'm a big fan of raw goat milk. Most people do better on goat milk. Some people can do cow's milk, but it's usually the pasteurized, homogenized dairy that people have issues with. Sometimes they can do it, but dairy is, it's worth trying. Don't give up on it because the calcium's in there, but there's also selenium, there's copper, there's retinol, there's protein, there's sugar, there's saturated fat. It's really a nutrient powerhouse. You can almost live on milk, and milk and honey especially.
That's interesting because it's ionized calcium, which is absorbable in the body, right? So it's not this kind of rock calcium that most people are afraid of, right?
Yeah, and if you have rock calcium stored in your body, like all these stones that I mentioned, gallstones, kidney stones, Shilajit. A lot of people have taken like Chanca Piedra, which I think is called like the stone breaker. But I believe Shilajit can do it better, or maybe combine them. That's what I would probably do if I had stones. But it's really, really powerful at bringing mineral balance to the body.
It's so fascinating what you said about the Shilajit in relationship to ceruloplasmin. Like, I didn't know that. I knew most of the stuff that you mentioned there in terms of chelating iron, but dude, I need to get back on Shilajit because I haven't been on it for a while, but I need to get back on it for that reason alone, because ceruloplasmin is so key. Without that, copper can't be fully loaded into it. And if that doesn't happen, then all that iron in your body is going to be completely unopposed. And then it's going to not be able to get back to the bone marrow. It's going to store in your tissues and it's going to oxidize. And ceruloplasmin, like I was thinking about this the other day, how do we make more of that? And you just said Shilajit can help with that. It's awesome.
Yep. Yeah, and it's acting on multiple levels to do that. It's providing it directly, and then it's also working on the copper that's already in your system. Um, so yeah, it's when Morley on my show said that that copper is a mineral that we need to be replacing daily, that really hit home. And I said, okay, I need to get more serious about this. And it
Yeah.
totally made sense. And that's kind of my perspective with magnesium, whole food vitamin C, vitamin E, and K27
Mm-hmm.
at this point. And I know E and K2 are stored, but it's also one of those things where E is balancing out the lipofuscin, as we'll probably talk about in future show, and then
Mm-hmm.
the K2 is balancing out the calcification piece, which, if you're going on 20, 30 years of building up that calcification, it's going to take some time to reverse that. And people might ask, how do you know, right? Or how do you even know if you're calcified? You can get a HTMA test called a hair tissue mineral analysis test, and they'll look at
Mm-hmm.
about 36 minerals. And that's pretty accurate. It's way more accurate than a blood test. That is
Mm-hmm.
where people get it wrong with minerals, is they just get a LabCorp standard basic blood test, and they send them to me all the time, and they say, what do I have wrong with me? And it's like, I don't see much here because it's a snapshot of your blood. It's not showing much. It's definitely not showing the iron stored in your tissues. It's definitely not showing, it's most likely not showing your red blood cell magnesium levels, the ceruloplasmin, the things that we really need to see to assess overall health. So getting things like a Dutch test, a HTMA, could be useful for some people, and especially the full Monty iron panel. I think that's an awesome snapshot for people to get to see where they're at with their health. But if you're dealing with any chronic condition, I think it's safe to assume that you have some level of calcification and lipofuscin and fibrosis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's like the foundation. And what I like about what you're doing too is there's, a lot of companies out there are just putting together products that they know are like hot sellers or whatever, and they're just kind of in it for the money. But with your products, like there's intention behind everything you're doing, and there's a reason why this fits into an overall approach. And you're not gonna, I mean, just by knowing you, for how long I've known you, it doesn't seem like you'd be the type of guy that would just all of a sudden release something that doesn't fit into this sort of philosophical construct of what the goals are with your health. And even though it can make you a lot of money if you release some, supplement that's outside of all this, it seems like you're the type of guy that is following a framework, and that framework is the foundation. And so that's why I like the intention behind what you're doing with these products. It's really cool.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a lot of fun for me, and I believe it's my life's work. And when I discovered health, it was an obsession that I knew would never go away.
Mm-hmm.
And, listening to your show is fun for me, and learning and reading books and studying and interviewing really smart people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just really grateful to have found this area, because it's really never ending. And there's so many dots and puzzle pieces to put together. And so many unexplored areas that, big names, big podcasts, big influencers are not talking about at all. And I really think a lot of it goes back to the money driven aspect of the supplement industry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say, it's not really the seed oils as much as the omega-3 supplements.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, because everyone's focusing on industrial seed oils, cause all the issues. But it's like, what about that fish oil, that Joe Rogan's talking about all the time?
I know.
So it's in our face, and it's a lot of deprogramming that we have to do. We were taught a lot of stuff in school, but we were also taught a lot of stuff through, podcasts and books. And whenever I read a book, I love going to thrift stores and buying health books, but I take everything with a grain of salt. I actually found a good book recently on osteoporosis, or arthritis or osteoporosis. I think it was the osteoporosis. And the first chapter was all about aspirin, which is really cool. It made me buy the book.
Oh, wow.
And,
Interesting.
and Yeah, and it was actually Ray Peat, and then talking to Danny and Georgie and Kate and all these people, they got me on the aspirin thing and that acetyl salicylic acid. Some of these pharmaceutical drugs are beneficial. I was actually kind of meditating on this for the past week. It's really the dyes and the titanium dioxide and a lot of the ingredients that they put in with these pharmaceutical drugs, these over-the-counter drugs, why they're so demonized, because those are giving a more harmful effect than the benefit that they're getting from the aspirin.
Interesting.
So in short, Bayer aspirin, for example, it's a smorgasbord of other ingredients. And you look at the active ingredient, great. You scroll down, other ingredients, holy smokes, what's all that? Well, all that is putting a burden on your system. And so there's clean brands, especially of aspirin. I use a GreenWave brand, and you can get like 1,000 aspirin tablets for like $12 or something. And it's great as a face mask to crush it up and make a paste. If you have a burn, an itch, my older brother had a itch that was really intense. I called him up. I said, get that aspirin, crush it up, mix it with water, rub it on there. He said immediately the itch went away.
Wow. Interesting.
But orally, it actually decreases iron in the system. And so I've heard Ray Peat say before that, he doesn't do blood donations. That really stuck with me because I think it was Danny or someone that asked him if he donates blood. And Dr. Raymond Peat said, no, I don't. He said, I'm actually probably iron deficient with the way that I'm living, with all of the milk that I'm drinking, because milk contains something called transferrin, which helps regulate iron. Sorry, not transferrin, lactoferrin, excuse me.
Oh, right.
Contains lactoferrin. And he's not even on the Shilajit. I know that for a fact. Ray Peat's not on Shilajit, but he's probably taking aspirin and milk, and he's sharp as a tack. So my thinking is, okay, got the milk, got the lactoferrin, the Shilajit, and you combine all of these things, probably be pretty good on the iron front. And so I'm excited experientially to see, because I was raised on Pufas, like I said, vegetarian, tons of soy. I mean, countless soy. I just ate it for years. And soybeans are full of Pufa. Not to mention all the pizza and Mexican food I ate down in Southern California, which was all cooked in canola oil. So, we got a lube job, and we have to do an oil change. And
for sure,
more saturated fats help, just being aware of that, and pastured eggs help because of the choline content. I believe you want to get around 300 milligrams a day of choline for the liver to support PUFA glucuronidation. So one egg has about 100 milligrams of choline, give or take.
No, that's awesome. Let's do a few questions. I won't be able to get to all of these, but we were supposed to only go for an hour, and we've been going for almost an hour and a half. So let's do that, and then after the questions, we'll just talk about any upcoming projects you might have going on. One thing I would like to solicit you to make, Matt, is some way to figure out how I can do blood donations without going the Red Cross, because they're still testing for big C, little v. That's a problem.
Yeah, I actually researched this late last year. I found the link here. I don't know. I think this project got scrapped, but it's called Venus Pro, and it's essentially a robot. It's probably freaking, I would guess it looks like, just looking at it, looks like $10,000, but wow. You just put your arm under it and it's automatic blood draw. And to me, that's what I'm most excited about for the future.
Totally.
If something like this comes out, I don't know if you can see in the chat, I just put the link there. I think we'll have something like this at some point. It's inevitable. I mean, I think there's a positive aspect to the whole AI, machine advancement, and this is one of them. But, I think there's no faster way to reverse disease than with blood donation. because whatever disease someone has, especially diabetes, heart disease, neurological disease, donating blood will take an immediate burden off the system and initiate the healing process. But I think for someone that's relatively healthy, like you and I think there's ways to do it without, especially if you're consistent long term. Like you mentioned in the commercial, the sauna, we actually just set up a barrel off-grid wood stove sauna that I'm really excited to use, and get back into that. You still there, Justin?
Oh, wait. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep, I can.
Oh, cool. My bad. Okay, so here we go. Can calcification affect the, I've never heard of this, meibomian glands and cause dry eye disease? Do you know what those glands are? Meibomian? Meibomian?
I don't. I would say that's most likely a lipofuscin issue, because lipofuscin accumulates in the retinal cells, the retinal pigmented epithelial cells of the eye. It's a primary cause behind like Stargardt's disease, but also all sorts of eye inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
So my go-to for eyes is vitamin E and niacinamide, also known as vitamin B3 or nicotinamide. Mm-hmm. And that combination is incredible for eye inflammation. I would also say, limit artificial light exposure. Wear yellow glasses during the day, red or orange glasses at night. Try to get outside without contacts or glasses during the day and get that natural light hitting the eye. Mm-hmm. But remember that a natural process of our cells is to take oxygen and make water, make CO2 and water. And so a lot of people aren't making enough water because their mitochondria are dysfunctional, because, various reasons, but calcification, lipofuscin, fibrosis, but especially the lipofuscin piece, especially in the eye, all those omega-3 supplements, all that vegetable oil, all that iron, even aluminum and estrogen, even serotonin excess has an effect on the eye. So there's multiple layers going on here, but those are kind of some quick tips to improve eye health. I think it's not talked about enough that artificial wavelength light dehydrates your eyes and causes myopia and robs them of water.
Right. What are your thoughts on blue-green algae in moderate amounts for minerals? Loaded question.
That was my lunch for about 3 or 4 years. I had a quart mason jar. I would brew it and make that mermaid liquid, and I would put chia seeds in there, and I thought I was getting my protein and everything I needed. It's okay, here and there, but I wouldn't use any algae long term. There's something to be said of spirulina for cancer and chlorella for heavy metal detox, but I think there are both better ways to deal with both of those things that don't require algae ingestion. So when I was spiraling down my PUFA kind of rabbit hole, I bought books on algae. I think it was like Eat Light and Feel Alive or something. And I was basically an algitarian, and I was taking all the different algae, and I said, oh, wow, I can almost live on these. But all of the algae are full of polyunsaturated fatty acids, aka Pufas, especially Hufas, which are highly unsaturated fatty acids. So that's the DHA, the EPA, and the ALA, the docosahexaenoic acid, alpha pentanoic acid, and alpha linoleic acid. And all of those accumulate in the tissues and complex with iron to form lipofuscin. So, long-winded answer, I would say no. If you like the flavor here and there, it's a great source of phenylethylamine and phycocyanin, which phycocyanin is that pigment that has an interesting effect on the liver. But knowing what I know now about pigments, I'm a little careful. Astaxanthin, zeaxanthin, lutein, beta carotene. A lot of us are familiar with that oranging effect from drinking carrot juice. I used to get that years ago. And that's from your body not converting that beta carotene into retinol. And there's nutrients required for that. And if that process doesn't happen, that can cause oxidative stress. So I'm a little careful now with the pigments, astaxanthin, which I used to megadose. Very careful with those color pigments like phycocyanin at this point.
Yeah, for sure. We have a bunch of other questions, but we have a number of questions about water filtration and structuring water and stuff like that. So let's just leave it on the water filtration. So here it says, what is Matt doing for complete whole house filtration? And then there's a bunch about what are you doing for structuring your water at home? So what are your own personal water strategies?
Yeah, so I brought the old system from my old house where I was on a well up here to the new house, which is on a spring. So the whole house is actually spring fed from an underground aquifer continuous, which is amazing. That's like the ultimate level to get to, because there's something to filtering tap water, and then a level up from that is filtering well water, and then a level up from that is filtering spring water. But you have to obviously own a house, and you have to, it's steps to get to that place. But the current filtration unit I have now is 7-stage, and they're called Big Blue canisters. So the first 3 stages are sediment, carbon, and there's different micron sizes. So generally you start bigger and you go smaller. And then the next 3 stages are deionization, a redundant deionization, because redundancy with water filtration is smart, because if you don't catch the acids in the first one, the second one will. Or if you forget to replace the first one, then the second one will work. And then remineralization. And so I actually have magnesium bicarbonate being injected into the water. And it's not the same as the concentrate, but it's trace amounts, and it's enough to make a difference. And then that goes into called a fractal water imploder. And that thing was a couple grand, but it's a huge vortexing whole house unit. And it's really heavy, and that's mounted vertically on the wall. And so all the water coming to the house vortexes or spins in it, which is water's natural movement in springs to spiral. So that has a structuring effect. And then after that, since I moved, I've been so busy that I've only been getting it out of, I have a Brio water dispenser. And since I'm off grid, I turned off the heating element, because heating takes more electricity than cooling. You learn that quickly when you're off grid. And so I get the cool water from that, because ice cold water is amazing. And there's some effect to that, electrical effect. So it's about 41 degrees Fahrenheit coming out of my Brio water cooler. So that's, again, a redundant pre-carbon, carbon, or sediment, pre-carbon, carbon. So that's just a simple 3-stage with the UV, just because I don't know what's in the pipes. This is a 20-year-old or so house. I don't know what the water could pick up. So again, redundancy, but I don't fill up from my faucet, even though it's all filtered. I fill up from that. And I fill up a MRET pitcher. So it's called molecular resonance effect technology. And I have a marker that I lined on it, filled up to that level. It's about 2 jugs full, maybe about roughly 2 quarts full of water. And I'll just hit the button in 30 minutes, and that actually changes the hydrogen bond angle of the water. It actually makes the water more bouncy. And that's usually as far as I'll go now. I still do have my Duet water revitalizer. I have to test the electricity and maybe run that on sunny days or see, but I'm just counting on my whole house vortexer for now. And then sometimes I'll run it through the infopathy, but usually I just do that to my milk and other liquids that I'll do the infoceuticals into the liquid. And the AquaCure, I fell off the wagon. I need to get back on that and maybe clean it out. But I was working that pretty hard, to where I was having to drain it and refill it quite often.
Right.
But I did feel the difference bubbling the hydrogen and oxygen into that. So, but yeah, my bare bones protocol is there for now. So
That's awesome. And that kind of leads a segue into any future projects. I know you probably got a lot of things that you're thinking about releasing. And I know, like we said before, some of them you may want to keep under wraps, but are there anything you're working on?
yeah, so magnesium complex should be coming really shortly. And I am working on a niacinamide tablet. So instead of just your basic capsule, which is really easy to get really anywhere, I'm working on like a lozenge form of B3. And I used to take NR, nicotinamide riboside, straight NAD, which is often prescribed to people with heart conditions. Biohackers are doing like NAD drips, like nicotinamide, adenine dinucleotide. And there's all this marketing around reversing aging and mitochondria and all this stuff. And it is exciting, but what NR and NAD can do, B3 can do the same thing. And it could raise NAD and NADH levels, or the ratio, just as much. So it's just about dosage. And with nicotinamide slash niacinamide, not niacin, this is non-flushing. It's a different form of B3. I do not recommend any more of the L. Ron Hubbard Scientology niacin flush with the trampoline and the sauna. I think that's harmful to your health because it causes a release of those Pufas that I always talk about. And that sunburn effect of warming up and you're getting all red like I used to do, that's histamine, serotonin, Pufas, and it's an inflammatory process. It's very stressful on the body. So it's better to take niacinamide. And niacinamide helps with cellular energy production, especially in the presence of fatty acids. So say you go out to eat and you get your fries that are cooked in peanut oil or whatever, your food that's cooked in canola oil. If you take your vitamin E, your Shilajit, and your niacinamide, you're pretty well covered from everything that you're getting hit with. The inorganic minerals, the excess Pufas, the iron. There's definitely ways to mitigate. And I think that's where people get hung up. They try to hold themselves in their house once they figure all this out and hear me talk and say, there's nothing to eat, and they freak out. It's like, well, no, you still have to live your life. It's just mitigate. And you don't have to develop disease, and you can still go out with your friends and your family and have fun. But just watch out for these things and be aware of it.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I love what you're doing. That's so cool. And there was talk for a while about water filtration. Are you working on any machines or anything?
Yeah. The focus is on the drinking water filter. It's going to be an under-counter drinking water filtration unit. And I can't say too much besides it will be proprietary. It's being built from scratch. We're not just, private labeling something that already exists. This is being built from the ground up, even to the housing that the filters are in. Wow. But it's going to be better than anything I've ever seen. Easier to use, less defects, and more affordable. And so, the goal is to release that before the end of this year. I know I kept saying last year, it's coming, but it's just been taking so long. It's like tiptoeing every little step of the process. But yeah, I'm so passionate about water that it's just a no-brainer that I should have a filtration system that I provide to people to make it easy instead of having them have to search around.
Yeah, no, totally. That's awesome. And so your main website for people that don't know is matt-blackburn.com and then mitolife.co, right?
That's correct. Yeah, and they can check out all the Mitolife products. And I just released a whole food vitamin C that is a mix of amla, camu, and rose hips. And it actually tastes pretty good. So a lot of my products, you can actually break out of the capsule and add it to your smoothie or whatever. You don't have to take a million capsules if you don't want to. The only one you do have to swallow whole is the dissolvidol because that's an enteric-coated capsule. But everything else, I mean, you could pour the dairy absorb right on your ice cream if you wanted to. And yeah, I think as of now, which is really rare, pretty much everything's in stock except for the the niacinamide, which will be back any day now. I think there was recently like a little FDA rumor going around. I know they pulled, what was that supplement? Have you heard about that, Justin?
I did. What was it? It was
the one people take for alcohol, right? For NAC, N-acetylcysteine.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Supposedly that was pulled from Amazon and all these shops. And then I heard rumors that B3 was going to be pulled too. I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I heard that. And I don't know what became of it. I didn't hear anything further. Did you?
I didn't. Yeah. I mean, I remember hearing years ago the Codex Alimentarius thing, and like they were going to ban every supplement. And it was like a marketing thing. So everyone just stockpiled.
I remember that. Yeah. I think
I still have the whole, yeah.
No, are they still trying to do that, I think?
Probably. Yeah, I mean, there's always these battles behind the scenes. I think it's smart to have a supplement cabinet and maybe 6 months to a year supply if you can do it. Even if just Shilajit, is probably a good idea. I'm still building out my supply. We just got some beehives set up, so if we have consistent milk and honey,
Dude,
and it
that's
can
all
hunt
you need.
deer and elk and moose. Yeah.
Yeah, you're set up for the apocalypse, man. That's awesome. That's so cool. That's awesome. Dude, thanks so much for being on. And it was really cool to kind of dive into the calcification aspect of CLF. And yeah, I'd love to do lipofuscin and fibrosis as well, because I've got a lot of questions about both. So that'll be a lot of fun. And I just love what you're doing, dude. And like the life that you've built for yourself, coming out of what you came out of. It's so cool just following you. So I'd recommend following Matt on Instagram. Watch his stories. I don't really follow that many people's stories, but whenever you post, I'll watch those because it's always something either entertaining or informational, which is cool. And your podcast is the only one that I really share. I listen to a ton of different podcasts, but your podcast is one of my favorites. And you do that once a week, right?
Yep, every Friday. Today's show is actually on the environmental, the thyroid harming effects of environmental pollutants. So that was a fun one.
Oh, that's cool.
And thanks, Justin. I really appreciate you inviting me on. It's always so much fun. And yeah, I would recommend just some resources if people want to dive deeper into calcification, although it's not going to be all in one source. Death by Calcium by Thomas E. Levy. I don't agree with everything, but the information here is great. And he even talks about vitamin C a lot and how osteoporosis is a focal scurvy of the bones. And so there's this actual vitamin C and bone connection, which is fascinating.
Interesting.
And then this book called The Calcium Lie, and there's 1 and 2. One's good, and it talks about how there's more to bones than just calcium. There's copper, there's zinc, there's magnesium, there's all these other minerals, and we tend to just only focus on calcium for bone and teeth health, but there's so many others. And it's a really deep subject, but it's definitely worth just knowing the basics and being more aware of the water you're drinking. And if your family members or relatives are having issues, look at how they're living their life and try to improve little things if they're open to it.
For sure. What was that book called by Kate Rayon Blue? We had her on a show years ago. I forget what the name of that book was. I read that back in the day.
Yeah, it's a really easy read, easier than those books. It's Vitamin K2 and the Calcium Paradox.
That's right.
I actually read this, I think, on 2 plane rides. It was pretty easy. And it goes into just all the effects of K2 deficiency. And these are just such huge areas when we start talking about vitamin D and K2 and magnesium, which is why I just like to focus on the overall balance. And then, you just have to, trust the body's intelligence that it will balance out.
Most definitely. Dude, thanks so much, man. It's always so much fun having you on, dude. And I love the work that you're doing. I fully support you, and it's awesome to see you do so well. So thanks for being on, dude.
Thanks, Justin. I'll keep sharing your show. Thanks for all the awesome episodes. And it's always fun. Let's do it again soon.
Yeah, for sure. We'll get it on the calendar. All right, man. Have a great rest of your day. By the way, what are you going to do rest of today?
I think probably go and pet the goats and
Nice.
maybe go on a little hike. Found some chaga mushroom on some birch trees around here.
Nice.
So,
Dude, score.
Yeah, maybe mow some grass a little bit. It's the time of year where it's really nice to go outside. I'd probably go kayaking on the lake and
Nice.
yeah, get some sunlight. I burn so easily though, because going from no ultraviolet light to tons of UV. And so
Yeah.
my strategy is cover up with a wide brimmed hat and a long sleeve and take my
Yep.
vitamin E. And I think
Yep.
it's really the eye effect. The skin doesn't require too much light for the lumisterol, but that eye stimulus, it's like, that's what I like to emphasize to people. Like, no sunglasses, get that even indirect light in your eyes throughout the day. That is where the magic happens. And,
Yeah.
and if you're sensitive to sun, then, early in the day, late in the day, if you are sensitive to getting burned, and you'll still get the benefits.
Yeah, you can preload with a little red light therapy before you go out. That'd be cool.
Yeah. I actually just spoke with Matt Maruka. I'm going to be interviewing him in, I think, about 3 weeks. And so we're going to dive into light pretty deep
cool.
there.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah. All right, dude. Have a good time on the lake today, and I'll be in touch. I'll see you on Instagram, and I'll message you with the links and stuff.
Awesome, Justin. Thanks so much. And yeah, have a great day. Thanks for having me on.
All right, man. Thanks a lot. Bye.
All right. Bye.
All right, guys. There you go, Mr. Matt Blackburn. We were going to do commercials, but you know what? A way if you want to support the show is if you would like to purchase any of Matt's items on his store, go through our link, biochargeme.com. That's our little store that we use to sort of fund our projects here. And it will support his work, and it will support our work. So, and you get a little 15% discount. There's no change in price. So if you just go to this page here, extremehealthradio.com/703. That's today's show, and the show page for today's show, I should say. And I'll put links to Matt's store, and if you want to pick up any of his products. And I'd recommend, if you could, anytime you do restock up, go through our link, and that will help support our work as well. And you'll get a discount of, I think, 15%. So that kind of adds up. So I hope you enjoyed that show. And what I like about Matt is that he's got a real strategy for what he's doing. Like I said during the show, he's not just pumping out product just to sell product. He's doing this with a real approach to what he's doing, and it's fitting into a framework that he's working with. And I really like supporting him. I met him years ago at the Jing Slingers, had a book launch party, maybe 2012, 2013. And he and I were there, and I had been doing my radio show, and he, I think, introduced himself to me, or his friends did or something. And then we got to talking, and I just hung out with him for most of the night. And it was a lot of fun, and I could tell right away that he was really into this stuff, and it's just cool to talk to people like that and to see what he's doing now. And I like supporting good people who are doing good work and who aren't just out there to make a buck. So, if you would, follow him and listen to his radio show. And anytime you support his work by buying his products, use our code and go through our store, biochargeme.com, and I'd greatly appreciate that. That would help support our work. The other two commercials we were going to do for today's show was the molecular hydrogen machine that he referenced, as well as the Stockton Aloe 1, which are really great products. But both of those can be found on our store, and there's a discount for the molecular hydrogen machine as well. So check that out. And I think that's a 10% discount, which is quite sizable. I think it comes to about $250 off the molecular hydrogen machine. So check that out. And like I said before, our store page is biochargeme.com. And yeah, I would appreciate that. And thank you for all your support, you guys. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for sharing our shows, for your support and donating to us. And if you want to dive deeper, join the Extreme Health Academy. And we talk about this. We talk about lipofuscin. We talk about vitamin D, red light therapy, spiritual, emotional aspects of disease, and different things you can do that most people aren't talking about when it comes to setting up a lifestyle that prevents disease from starting in the first place. It's that foundation. And really, really key and really, really important. And so if you want to work with me directly, I can be found in there. And if you go to, how about this? If you join our newsletter list, there's a little special bonus offer that I like to present to you. So just go to extremehealthradio.com, or if you just go to extremehealthradio.com/703, that's today's show page. And on that page, you'll also see a link to join our newsletter. And if you want to join the Academy for a discounted rate, go through and join our newsletter, and there's a little offer that pops up. And that's a great way to get access to me and to other members, thousands of other members around the world. We have a member map on there. We do live events, 5 or 6 times a month, Q&A sessions, live workshops with different practitioners, all kinds of cool stuff, different protocols, yearly, monthly, daily calendars of what you can do to really upregulate your health. We've got all kinds of stuff going on in there. So come and join us inside the Extreme Health Academy if you want to support our work and take your health to new levels. And if you have questions about any of this stuff, come and join me on a Friday morning. I'm live every Friday morning before this show, answering questions and supporting people on every aspect of your health. And that's what I do. My mom almost died of cancer, and that's why I got involved in all this stuff. So I didn't want to see anyone suffer and die. So that's why I started the show and all that we're doing here at Extreme Health Radio. You guys are awesome. So thank you again for all your support on Instagram, on just all the different platforms. And we're moving over to different platforms like BitChute and stuff. So you can find us on there. But the best way to do it is just to join our newsletter. That way we send out, I think, two emails a week on Mondays and Thursdays, I believe, for what we have going on, past shows, upcoming shows. But the best place is just Instagram right now. I'm trying to be more active on there with stories and with posts and putting up all the shows that we release every single day up on Instagram, so you can follow us on there and keep up to date with our family, what we have going on, and our stories and all that good stuff. So you guys are awesome. Again, thank you for your support. Thank you. You guys are amazing. I love you all. If you have any questions, please just send me an email, and I will I'll help you out to the best of my ability. And if you are an Academy member, I'll see you on Friday mornings at 9 a.m. Pacific time for an hour before these shows that we do. All right. Love you guys. Talk to you soon. Bye.
No material on this blog is intended to suggest that you should not seek professional medical care. Always work with qualified medical professionals, even if you educate yourself in the field of live food, nutrition, and alternative medicine. I'm not a doctor, nor am I offering readers medical advice of any kind. None of the information offered here should be interpreted as a diagnosis of any disease, nor an attempt to treat or prevent any disease or condition. While information in this blog is discussed in the context of numerous conditions, it can be dangerous to take action based on any information in this blog or to start any health program without first consulting a health professional. The content found here is for informational purposes only and is in no way intended as medical advice, as a substitute for medical counseling, or as a treatment/cure for any disease or health condition, and nor should it be continued as such. Always work with a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your diet, prescription drug use, lifestyle, or exercise activities. This information is provided as is, and the reader/viewer assumes all risks from the use, non-use, or misuse of this information.